Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla, and I am the marketing manager here at FuseForward. And I'd like to welcome you to the third episode of our new webinar series, Remote Control. This series is designed to take a quick deep dive into technical challenges that people are facing now that most of us have transitioned rapidly to a remote workforce. So we're all pressed for time these days. The idea of this series is that it's a quick deep dive. If you have questions through the session, there's a Q&A panel below. Feel free to drop them in there and we'll answer them during the session. And if not, we'll come back to them towards the end. So today we have Ray, our solution engineer. Ray is an AWS-certified professional with over 20 years experience building and managing complex IT systems for enterprise. And today he's going to be talking about VPN challenges, which is a hot topic. So I'm going to hand it over to him and we can get started. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Carla. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you may reside. Today I'm going to be talking about the VPN connections and establishing a VPN landing zone. So if we talk about the pre-pandemic timeframe, wherever you may be, it could have been March, it could have been February, wherever you are, there's a different time frame in which it started. But essentially, if you think back during that time, you had an admin and other staff that basically were office bound. So basically all their work would be in the office, their computers, their monitors would always be in the office, and they'd always be working in the office without any remote function. And then possibly you would have like a sales staff or a support staff that was quite mobile, and they actually either worked in the office and had the capability of doing remote work. So you always had like a smaller population of people that actually had the capability of working remotely. Fast forward to our current situation, like today, everybody now is working from home, unless of course you're deemed an essential worker, in which you then continue to go to the office. But essentially, the majority of the people are working from home now. So now you have your population, a large population of people who are actually requiring working from home. And if you have on-premise applications, essentially all these users then have to VPN to gain access to these applications if they're actually on-premise and they're behind a firewall and whatnot. So basically, you may have a client VPN that you have sized for this, but if you had it sized for the pre-pandemic timeframe, essentially you're probably undersized, and basically your users are finding that the performance is not great, and albeit you may have employees actually sharing access to gain access to the firewall, behind the firewall in the applications. So in terms of the VPN challenges, we look at insufficient connection. So again, based on the number of users that are requiring access to the applications on the on-premise, is basically, it's a larger population. So basically you have more people accessing the same resources that basically a small number of people had. Bandwidth reduction. So you may have sized your firewalls or routers based on that requirement as well. So basically you have a firewall or a router that basically only has capability of a certain megabits per second or whatnot, and basically you're running into a wall right now because you have more users accessing all these services. You may be using multi-factor authentication, and basically you only have so many MFA tokens that you can allot to people. So again, you're limiting the number of people that have gain access. In terms of security, now because you have a larger population, you have more of a contact surface. So basically you have more users that you have to worry about, as well as more accounts that you may have to manage and whatnot. So I'm going to talk roughly about the three types of VPNs. So first of all, a home VPN. Anybody can purchase a home VPN service. And a home VPN service basically allows you to to pop out in another country, for example. Say you have a desire and you like faulty towers, for example, and Netflix doesn't allow you to watch it in the country that you reside in, say Canada or the US. So now you have to pop out in the UK. So basically you would purchase a home VPN, and basically you can pop out and it appears that you're actually in the UK. So then you can watch your faulty towers to all your delight. We also look at a corporate VPN. A corporate VPN is basically what the company provides to the workers. So for example, in the pre-pandemic timeframe, these would be the mobile workforce and whatnot. They would be provided a VPN from the corporate side to allow them behind the firewall. And this is what's really becoming restricted right now because of the fact that everybody is requiring the corporate VPN. And then we'll, and basically the crux of this discussion is basically the landing zone. And in the landing zone, basically we can look at a couple things basically. So landing zone can be a client VPN. So for example, if you have users that are using their home computers to access something, essentially AWS has a managed service for this client VPN as well. We will also talk about AWS workspaces. So basically it's a desktop as a service, and both of these managed services actually scales to the number of users that is required. So for example, if AWS client VPN, it'll scale to as many users as you require. And because this is AWS, they have very large so-called pipes to the internet. So I don't think that the internet bandwidth will be an issue in regards to these two managed services. So let's dive into the landing zone. So so I'm going to talk about the workspaces that FuseForward has to offer within this that allow you for this landing zone. So you have your users on the left, and they're gaining access to these AWS workspaces. So basically the workspaces are powered by AWS, and the users are accessing these workspaces via the internet, and it's all encrypted using 443 HTTPS to do the authentication. The users can access the workspaces via a web browser. So if they're using Windows or Mac OS, they can use Chrome or Firefox. If they're using Linux, they can use Firefox. In addition to that, if they're running Windows, Mac, Android, or even an iPad, there's specific applications that can run within these different platforms that allow them a thick client that basically allows them a desktop. So these AWS workspaces, they can be thought of as basically a desktop as a service that resides within the AWS cloud. So these workspaces, they're located in Canada, Western and Eastern United States, the UK, Eastern and even Western European locations within the AWS infrastructure. So basically the landing zone is, as you see in the here, let me move my mouse over here. So basically where your workspace is basically networks to the landing zone. What the landing zone allows you is basically the networking that enables the on-premise or even cloud applications. So if we were to look at starting from the top, so basically we can allow for the AWS workspace to use federated services from Active Directory. So we can, from the landing zone, we can create a VPN service from the landing zone up to your on-premise Active Directory, or even if your Active Directory resides in Azure. So if it's an Azure located Active Directory, we can provide a VPN service to connect into that, so that when your users are logging in to their workspaces, they're actually using the credentials that they have, either your on-premise or your Azure Active Directory. In addition to that, we can also establish a VPN to the on-premise. So basically, all your applications that actually reside within your on-premise infrastructure behind the firewalls, we can actually create a VPN tunnel into that, such that the workspaces are then networked up to, and basically the users can get access to those applications. And what's showing here is the database and applications. In terms of the hybrid infrastructure, if you have other applications that you either host on premise or extend out to the public cloud, such as AWS or Azure or even Google, we can allow that as well. And even if you have a colo location, we can allow that access to it as well. In addition to that, we can allow the internet access from these workspaces as well. So for example, if you want all your internet traffic to still flow through your on-premise infrastructure, we can allow that as well. So basically, it would flow through the VPN tunnel onto your on-premise, and then basically users would then access the internet through that way. If you're finding that your on-premise firewalls and routers are restricted in terms of internet traffic, we can allow that internet access from the landing zone as well. In addition to this, I've just spoken about VPN connections from the landing zone. We can also set up a private network connection from the landing zone to either Azure or your on-premise as well. And this allows more of a performance, a higher performance connection as well. It allows for sovereignty, for example, and this is kind of analogous to, say, for like an AWS term, a direct connect or an express route from the Azure side. So basically, if you're, say, for example, you're a Canadian company and you're regulated and mandated that none of your network can traverse a border, essentially we can assist in creating a direct connect or to your on-premise, and basically ensure that all the traffic will remain within the Canadian borders. I've been talking about VPNs as a best practice. It's a good idea to have actually dual tunnels. So for example, all your users will be using the workspaces. It's a good idea to have dual tunnels to allow for that, so that in the event of an issue with one of the tunnels, there's a failover tunnel as well. And again, I've been talking about workspaces, but this can be applied to the AWS client VPN as well. In addition to this, if you don't have ports or you don't have a firewall available on your on-premise, fuse forward, we can also provide a firewall hardware device that can be installed in your site to basically have a managed product. So basically, we would be managing that firewall that would be connecting from our fuse forward landing zone to your on-premise. So in terms of the do's and don'ts, in terms of the takeaways, log all your user access. So basically, all your users will be coming in, and they should all have their own accounts. Essentially, all that access information should be logged and reviewed. The reason why I suggest that every single user have their own account is the fact that if you're sharing accounts, that could be an issue, because if that password falls into the wrong hands, or if that account is compromised, effectively, if whoever's sharing that, you're gonna be affecting those people who are sharing that. Whereas if every single user has their own account, you can isolate the incident. For example, if you have one person that has been compromised, essentially you can shut down that person's access, and it will just be affecting that single person's access. Implement multi-factor authentication. So if you already have a multi-factor authentication method within your infrastructure, that can be utilized, or we can implement a multi-factor authentication within the infrastructure as well. And this could be the soft tokens, such as a Google Authenticate, or even up to a hardware token, such as a YubiKey or whatnot. And ultimately provide instructions for your end users. So essentially, this is a tough time for everybody, and the more instructions you give to your end users, the less probably support issues that you'll probably end up doing as well. You can also look at setting up least privilege for users as well. And the one thing about if you deploy least privileges for your users, you have to be prepared the fact that there could be a large number of support calls, because ultimately if Bill can't access X folder that he was able to access before because of the fact that you've provided the least privilege, he doesn't have access to that point. So there'll be more support cases in regards to that. In terms of the don't, basically, don't allow shared accounts, and that was basically what I spoke about before, because ultimately you get into the issue where if you have shared accounts, you're sharing passwords. If that falls into the wrong hands, ultimately you could be taking out more than one user, and it's best to have everybody have their own accounts and have their own passwords and whatnot. Don't underestimate users and bandwidth. I think at this point in time, we understand that because of the fact that the pre-pandemic time to now, we have probably underestimated the users and bandwidth. So we're probably suffering from that at this point. So when looking at workspaces, don't size it for the exact number at this point, because ultimately it could grow. So always keep that in mind as well. And another do, essentially, I said it before, you could use federated services so that basically you can federate to your on-premise Active Directory, or even your Azure Active Directory if it resides in Azure. And this basically, it helps your users such that it's one less additional password that they would have to remember. But in doing that, implement the multi-factor authentication such that you want to really lock things down. So essentially, those are my do's and don'ts in regards to this. So I think it's time for question and answer. Carla?
Yeah, so I just have one question here,
Okay.
and it's about the home VPNs. So if you're a small business and you only have a few users accessing applications, would a home VPN service suffice?
So the thing about the home VPN is basically you have a lot of the home VPNs that are available to consumers. You're using this company's infrastructure, and basically all you're doing is you're popping out somewhere. So I have a VPN service, a home VPN service, such that I admit I like to watch PBS, and some of the PBS content's not available to me. But the home VPN service just allows me to pop out, say in Seattle, and basically I can watch the PBS service. It also allows me to pop out somewhere in Vancouver or Toronto, but it doesn't necessarily allow for the networking from your end users to your on-premise infrastructure.
Okay,
So
great.
so
it's not appropriate.
It wouldn't be. It wouldn't provide that functionality.
Okay, great. What would you recommend for someone like that?
I believe there are some VPN services that are available within like a Linux or even a Windows, but basically like one or two users, it's difficult because you'd really have to look at what applications are required from those users and whatnot.
Okay, great. Well, actually, I think that's it for questions this morning. Just going to pop my video back on,
okay.
And say thanks everyone for attending today. Our next webinar is on May 28th. So 3 weeks from now at the same time on a Thursday. We'll be sending a recording of this session out to anyone. And if you want to subscribe to our series and be informed of the upcoming topics, there's a link in the screen here, and it's also just being posted in chat. So you can do so there. Otherwise, I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. And if you have questions for us, feel free to email us. You can email sales@fuseforward.com, and I can pop that in the chat now. And a member of our team will be in touch. Thanks for attending, everyone.